You have seen this footage, black and white, a little unsteady, pointing straight down at a road somewhere in Iran. A truck is parked on the shoulder, a small bright dot settles onto its roof and holds there. A few seconds pass, then the frame blows out. Central Command put it out. News networks ran it all summer. And nobody asked the most obvious question it raises. Who is holding the camera? Not who released the weapon. Who was already positioned above that truck before it ever pulled over. Because that truck belongs to a class of target that spends 15 minutes exposed, and it picks which 15. More than 4,000 of them were serviced inside that window over Iran, and no platform accounted for more of those kills than the one holding this camera. That is the real difficulty of this war. Not the weapon, the frame it arrives in. Air forces have been failing at that problem for decades. The aircraft holding that frame is an MQ-9 Reaper. Cruises at roughly 200 knots, not stealthy, and nearly 30 were destroyed across this campaign. The Air Force Chief of Staff called it the most valuable player of the war. Modern war has problems that better hardware cannot solve. At War Intel, we find the shape of the problem first, because the shape decides the answer. Start with why 15 minutes is enough to defeat almost anything an Air Force can put in the sky. The April ceasefire broke in the first week of July. From that point, Central Command ran strikes night after night continuously through the rest of the month. The target list stayed consistent. Air defense sites, coastal radar, missile and drone launch positions, command nodes, 3 of those 4 stay in one place. The launch sites do not. And that single property changes what kind of problem they are. Set a coordinate against a reinforced bunker, and it stays valid indefinitely. Survey it last week, strike it tonight, and the only remaining variable is how much energy you push through how many feet of concrete. Every part of that equation belongs to you. A launcher gives you the expiring coordinate. It is valid for the 15 minutes the vehicle stays above ground, and the vehicle sets the clock. So the solution requires 2 events to line up. The door opens and a sensor is pointing at it. The first condition is entirely outside your control, which means the whole problem falls into the second one, and the second one is not a capability. It is a schedule. Worth saying precisely because the rest of this rests on it. A fixed target is an energy problem. A mobile target is a timing problem. Nothing else about them differs. And a timing problem shuts off the 2 exits an Air Force normally reaches for. More sensitivity gains nothing if the sensor is aimed elsewhere at the relevant minute. More speed gains nothing either. Transit time alone burns the window, so an aircraft launched on a tip-off arrives to photograph an empty stretch of road. Both upgrades improve performance inside a window that has already closed. What remains is the one method that cannot be purchased, only spent. Be there first. It looks so much like doing nothing that it was mistaken for obsolescence for 20 years. There is a second layer, and it is worse. The defender is not only hiding, he is also supplying things to hit. A decoy costs a fraction of a launcher and photographs identically from 20,000 feet. So a force under pressure to produce results will find results, and every strike it reports lands exactly where the defender wanted it. That trap has caught better resourced campaigns than this one. Every generation has gone hunting mobile launchers with the best equipment of its day, and the post-war assessments keep returning the same finding. Massive sortie counts, confident strike reports, almost no confirmed launchers destroyed. Against this class of target, effort converts into activity rather than effect. A fighter reaches the assigned box, holds while fuel permits, and turns for home. The launcher waits it out. Every component performs to specification against the wrong specification. A timing problem worked with the instruments of an energy problem. Over Iran in July, it broke the other way. Not because anyone built a better sensor, it came down to what the fleet was finally willing to leave in the sky, which is where the Reaper enters. Not as the most capable aircraft in the theater, but because this problem asks for something no fighter was built to supply. 3 requirements. The first sounds like no requirement at all. Hold a sensor over an empty patch of ground for hours doing nothing. Almost all of that time is spent watching desert. The remaining fraction is the entire reason the campaign exists. It asks for none of the things a combat aircraft is optimized to provide. Look at what the Air Force had in theater. F-22s forward deployed to Ovda in Israel. F-35s. F-15Es, with B-2s reaching in from outside the region. All of them are constrained by two things, and neither is the engine. Fuel is the first, and aerial refueling handles it. The second is the person in the seat. Attention has a floor. None of that is a flaw. An F-15E is built for the problem where the coordinates are already known. Arrive fast, carry weight, leave. Against that problem, every design choice in it is correct. It is simply being asked the wrong question. Now the arithmetic. And this is where intuition misleads. An F-16 out of a Gulf base might fly a 7-hour sortie, which sounds like a long time. Run the subtraction. An hour and a half out, the same returning, and 2 or 3 tanker hookups that each pulled the aircraft off station and out of position. What remains is perhaps 2 hours actually overhead the assigned square, and even that time comes in broken intervals rather than one continuous block. An MQ-9 flies more than 27 hours, and nearly all of it is spent parked overhead. The crew rotates shifts on the ground. The aircraft goes nowhere. Look at how the airframe is put together, and you can read that requirement directly off it, because almost nothing about the design makes sense for a combat aircraft. Start with the wing. 66 feet of carbon fiber composite on a fuselage only 36 feet long, proportioned like a glider. A long, narrow wing is efficient and slow. That is the wrong trade for anything that needs to escape. It is the right one for something whose job is to remain airborne. Behind it sits a single turboprop, producing 900 horsepower, chosen for fuel economy, not speed. Weigh it. Empty, the aircraft comes in at roughly 4,900 pounds and takes off at over 10,000. Nearly half of what leaves the runway is fuel. There is room for that because the airframe carries no cockpit and nobody to protect. Every pound that a manned design spends keeping a person alive has been reallocated here to keeping the aircraft in the air. It is an airframe built to loiter first and fight second, with the weapons attached afterward from hardpoints under the wing. The point was never which number is larger. It is the ratio of useful time to total time aloft. An F-16 burns most of its fuel getting to the position. A Reaper burns most of its fuel holding it. A second variable multiplies the first, because a launcher does not announce which grid it will surface in. At the height of the campaign, roughly a dozen orbits were running over Iran at once. None of that asks for a more sensitive sensor. The problem is not sensitivity, it is duration and coverage. But being present for 27 hours only matters if, during those hours, you can identify what you are looking at. The problem does not end at seeing something move. On any Iranian highway at any hour, there are hundreds of vehicles moving. The actual requirement is going from there is motion to that specific vehicle in minutes, with enough confidence to release a weapon. No optical sensor scans an entire province at identification resolution. So the first step is not looking closely, it is filtering. That job falls to the APY-8 Lynx II, a synthetic aperture radar mounted under the fuselage. It is one of 2 sensors that the same long wing lets the aircraft carry for a full day. In its ground-moving target indicator mode, it sorts on exactly one criterion: what is in motion. The physics is Doppler shift. A stationary object returns the transmitted wave at the same frequency it was sent. A moving one compresses or stretches it in proportion to its speed, the same way a passing siren drops in pitch the moment it goes by. So the radar is not comparing 2 images to find what changed. It reads velocity out of a single return, which is why the detection threshold can be set low enough to catch a launcher crawling off a hardstand at walking pace. And because this is radio energy rather than light, sandstorms and darkness never enter the equation. Filtering still does not earn you a weapons release. A cargo truck and a camouflaged launcher are both bright moving dots. The aircraft passes the coordinate forward to its second sensor, the MTS-B, Raytheon's multispectral targeting system riding in the ball turret under the nose. It swings onto the patch of ground the radar flagged and examines it in several wavelengths simultaneously: infrared, visible light, and a band between them stacked into one image. It can detect vehicles beyond 35 nautical miles and identify them beyond 17. The physics here is the useful part. Camouflage is a single wavelength solution. A net defeats visible light because its weave is sized against visible light. But a diesel that has been running sits well above the surrounding ground temperature, and everything radiates according to its heat. A warm engine block emits most strongly in the mid-infrared, at wavelengths roughly 20 times longer than the light that net was built to intercept. At that scale, the net is transparent. It was a lock built for one key, and we arrive with a different one. There is a general principle buried in that. Concealment is always concealment from something specific. Look across multiple wavelengths at once, and the man hiding has to win at every one of them, while the man looking only has to win at one. Notice the division of labor inside the aircraft. The radar finds, the optics confirm, and both have to happen inside the same 15 minutes, so they cannot be split across two airframes that would need to talk to each other first. The Reaper is not a camera that happens to fly. It is a hunting machine carrying a search instrument and a confirmation instrument on the same wing. And identification does not stop at the vehicle. The turret can follow it back along the route it came from, to the culvert or the unremarkable building it pulled out of an hour earlier. An F-15E that departs on fuel never sees that stretch of road at all. And here the 15-minute window loses some of its power. Identify the vehicle, and you have a target for a quarter of an hour. Trace it back, and you have an address that keeps. A mobile target problem converted into a fixed target problem, the kind the rest of American air power was built to solve. It converts them one at a time, though. A tunnel network has many entrances, and the ones nobody has traced yet still open on schedule. Every address acquired this way narrows the problem without closing it, which is why the orbits stay up. But both of those tasks, the waiting and the identifying, require a condition that not every aircraft is permitted to meet. The first two requirements produce a third one, and it is the one nobody wants to sign for. Both waiting and identifying have to happen inside hostile airspace over a fixed point for hours. Whatever does that will be found. The problem does not ask for something that can hide. It asks for something that can afford not to. That condition disqualifies the most capable aircraft in the theater. Read it against the F-22s at Ovda and the F-35As flying alongside them. Stealth is a contract, and geometry writes the terms. A shaped airframe does not absorb radar energy so much as redirect it, scattering the return away from the transmitter. That works only across a band of aspect angles. Fly the planned profile and the reflection goes where no receiver is positioned. Orbit one point for hours and you present every angle there is repeatedly to every radar in range. Transmitting inverts the same problem. An active radar broadcasts a signal designed to travel out and return, so a listener picks it up at full strength, while the sender strains to detect the faint echo. The emission always outruns the detection, which is why a low observable aircraft on a penetration run keeps its radar off. An F-35 cannot be stealthy and loiter at the same time. It is not inferior. It is forbidden by its own contract. And that leaves a gap directly over the target. The gap the Reaper was pushed into. It fits for two reasons that have nothing to do with performance. Being seen does not destroy its value, and being shot down does not cost a life. So it holds an orbit over that patch of desert for as long as the tasking runs, exactly what the F-35 is not permitted to do. From there, it pushes coordinates over Link 16 straight onto the cockpit display of the aircraft that will act. So the stealth fighter is not blind. It is simply not permitted to look out loud, and that is what the word eye means here, not the sharpest eye in the formation. The eye the problem permits to open, because every other eye pays a price the mission cannot absorb. Now go back to the bright dot sitting on the roof of that truck. That is laser designation, and it answers the opening question without anyone needing to confirm anything. The beam is not a marker painted once and left there. It pulses at a coded rate, and the seeker in the bomb's nose divides its field of view into quadrants and steers toward whichever one is receiving the strongest reflection at that code. The guidance is not reading the target. It is reading a spot of scattered light on the target's surface, and that spot only exists while somebody overhead is still holding the beam on it. So it is a timing requirement, dressed as an optical one. Whoever holds the beam has to be there, steady, until it is over. And it settles the question of range. The turret identifies a vehicle at 17 nautical miles out, but a designator has to put usable energy on one surface panel of one truck and keep it there while the weapon flies. Watching can be done from standoff. Guiding cannot. That is the difference between the orbit an aircraft would prefer and the one the task requires. And in a great many of those clips, the indications are that the bomb did not come from the aircraft holding the camera. An F-35A, designating for its own weapon, would have to come down and hold station directly overhead until impact, which breaks the contract described above. So it releases and goes, and leaves the light to the thing already there, with nothing to lose by being seen. The division of labor is visible in the frame itself. What can survive staying holds the beam. What cannot carries the explosive. That is what the opening question was really asking. The bomb was the easy half. Plenty of aircraft in the theater could deliver it. The hard half was the frame, and somebody had to stay to produce it. Viewers have watched that arrangement for months without once being told what they were looking at. And a solution built on holding still where you can be seen has a weakness anyone can work out, including the other side. The defender read the same equation and reached a simpler conclusion. If the kill chain begins at presence, there is no need to contest the strike packages at all. Go after the thing that waits. And a solution built on waiting carries the loiter paradox written into it. Waiting requires circling. Circling produces a pattern, and a pattern is something the defender can plan around. The property that solves the problem is the property that exposes it. No design change fixes that, because the two are the same property. The airframes came down in the air and on the ground, and nearly 30 were lost across the campaign. That number only means something alongside what the campaign bought with it. More than 4,000 pop-up targets serviced inside their own windows, with no platform contributing more of them than this one, against a category of target that has historically absorbed thousands of sorties and yielded almost nothing. 30 airframes against that record is not a trade going badly. The trade goes badly one step further back. On July 17th, the drone hangars at Muwafaq Salti in Jordan were struck, and 8 newly produced Reaper airframes were destroyed in storage, still unassembled. Ordinarily, that is an accounting entry. It is not, because the MQ-9A production line closed in 2025, and the manufacturer has fewer than 10 new airframes left to deliver worldwide. The fleet went from more than 230 to 165 to roughly 135 inside 18 months, and nothing is coming the other way. That is the lesson worth carrying out of this campaign, because it is not really about drones. Every strategy built on persistence is secretly a production problem. Presence is not a capability you purchase once. It is a budget you burn hour by hour, and the enemy sets the rate. So the measure of such a strategy is never how capable the individual unit is, it is how fast the line behind it replaces what the weak just consumed. The Air Force had the aircraft, the sensors, the crews, the doctrine. What it did not have was a factory still building the thing. And a closed production line turns every combat loss into a permanent one, which is why the long-running argument about this airframe has been asking the wrong question. The footage still comes out black and white. The truck on the shoulder, the bright dot on the roof, the frame washing out. This week, next week, the same vantage point. And that vantage point is the thing we take apart at War Intel, because it is where the answer to a problem becomes visible before anyone names it. Now you know who is holding the camera, and why it was already there when the truck pulled over. It had been overhead for hours before there was anything to film. The tunnel door still opens, and the other side still starts the clock. That much cannot be taken from them. But a clock only helps while your opponent does not know where the door is, and that is the part now in question. The Reaper was never an answer to which aircraft is better. It answers something narrower and much harder. When the other side starts the clock, what can wait? Everything else on that airframe follows from having been there, and none of it substitutes for having been there. For years, the argument has been whether to retire the airframe on the grounds that it is too vulnerable for contested airspace. July confirmed that half of it. But the argument measures the airframe. The thing to measure is the problem, which does not retire. Mobile launchers will outlast this aircraft by decades, and whatever replaces it pays the same price on the first night it goes up. Equipment is not designed out of ambition, it is designed out of the shape of a problem. So if you want to know what a military is about to build, do not look at what it is flying. Look at what it cannot catch.